Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Bridget Moix, and I'm FCNL's General Secretary, and we welcome you to our national call, Effective Advocacy in a Chaotic Era. And we are so glad you are here. I just want to ask Justin, put that photo back up for just a second. I hope that as you gathered here, and we are now crossing 250 people on the call, and they are still coming in. It is such a joy for me to watch these names and places people are calling in from all across the country. Dear friends joining us tonight, thank you so much. I hope you have a chance to just take a few deep breaths right now. It has been such a turbulent time. And this photo I wanted to share as our opening because I took it the other day walking across the front of the Capitol here in Washington, D.C. And I saw these incredible flowers and this perspective. And after I took the picture looking at it, what I saw in this photo, I see the People's House. I see it standing, still standing. I see some sort of ominous intrusions encroaching upon it. And I see this incredible, beautiful field of flowers of us, the FCNL network, making sure that we keep the path open to Congress. We keep upholding our democracy. So, and I hope you're enjoying some spring where you are. It really is beautiful here in Washington. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Justin, for showing that photo one more time. It is a gift to be here in spring, even amid all that is happening. Such a difficult time, and yet we know that it is a time of renewal and action, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So I'm so happy that we have some of our amazing leaders on staff here to have a conversation together and then with all of you about the times that we're in and what we can do to uphold democracy and have effective advocacy action even in this context. I'm very pleased that we have our Associate General Secretary for Policy and Advocacy, Amelia Kegan, one of our inspiring and effective leaders. She'll be talking to us about what is happening in Washington, how we're seeing things here, and what are the issues before us. We're then going to also bring in the amazing LaVida Davis, who is the director for our strategic advocacy work. And she's going to share the concrete actions. What can we actually do and get us inspired to take this work into next week, which is our April recess and time for great action. So a few tech announcements before we dive into the conversation. We are already at almost 300 people on the line now. This is wonderful, incredible, thank you. And we have live captioning, so that should be available to all if you're joining. So please do access that if you need. And we have had the chat box open. We'll leave it open a minute or two more because people are still coming in and joining. But when we get into the conversation, we're going to limit that chat box to avoid distractions. You can still contact all of us if you need to make a comment. So you can reach us and we can reach back out to you, but we want to avoid distractions. So there won't be a live chat going throughout the whole conversation. There is a Q&A box. You should see it at the bottom of your screen. When we get to Q&As or before, you can put your questions right into that box at any time, and we will collect them and talk at the end of the program to your questions and try to answer them. So please note that Q&A box and use it. So we really are at a pretty frightening crossroads in our country, I have to say. I just want to start with a story from my recent experience that really made me think deeply about the state that our country is and what comes next. I had the opportunity to travel to Poland recently and be part of a training with government officials from around the world on atrocity prevention, on how to prevent genocide and atrocities. This took place right at Auschwitz. And part of the training was to tour Auschwitz to really understand that history there and in order to prevent it. And On the tour, one of the lessons they share, it is, of course, a harrowing experience. Some of you may have been there. And on the tour, one of the points they make is that Auschwitz, as a prison camp, did not begin with how it ended, which was as a death camp for Jewish population that was brought there. The first people detained and taken to Auschwitz were actually political opponents. They were students. They were monks. They were people who were speaking out and opposing the Nazi regime and what they were doing. And it really struck me listening to that tour. And then I left the tour and I was in Europe. So I opened up, it was the afternoon, and I opened up what was the morning news for us here in the US. And there was an article right there on the front page about a student of peace building. I was a student of peace building, a student of peace building from Georgetown, who was there on a visa, completely legitimate, who had been detained for no reason. And so it really struck me about the threats that we're seeing here in the US. They are deep and real, and there are experts on authoritarianism and democracy and backsliding democracies who are warning that we need to take action now. We need to not let this backsliding continue, but to really mobilize all our tools, all our strategies, and engage to push back. So that's what we're going to be talking about for FCNL's work. In the midst of this constitutional crisis, we have economic crisis from this administration, the dismantling of our government institutions, all of this that's happening. What can we really do? And how is this affecting FCNL's work? So I want to bring in Amelia. And Amelia is tracking things in Congress so closely. And I want to just ask you, Amelia, to help us get our heads around what is happening. What are the biggest threats that we are facing in FCNL's work? And, what's this broader work that we need to do to build that world that we seek?
Great. Thank you, Bridget. And it is so good to see all of you who are here with us this evening. Really just grateful for you taking some time on a Thursday night to join us. So I would, the threats before us are numerous, but I kind of categorize them in three buckets. First, there is kind of legislation in Congress, and we are very focused on the big budget legislation that is moving through Congress right now, that the House took a step in voting today. And that would, I think, as many folks know, have enormous consequences for potentially tens of millions of people. We're talking about this budget reconciliation bill, and it's really shaping up to have these draconian cuts to Medicaid, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, taking away healthcare and food assistance for millions of families, rolling back critical investments in clean energy, all while extending tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and pouring more money into detention, deportation, family separation, greater militarization. And we have a really big role to play in blocking some of those worst policies. And so there's action we can take there. Then there's the second bucket of what this administration is doing in really challenging Congress's power of the purse, right? We're seeing this in DOJ's actions to dismantle congressionally established agencies and departments, withholding funding from congressionally appropriated programs, things like that. And we've leaned into this area, particularly in responding to this dismantling of USAID and the sudden elimination of so many critical U.S. foreign assistance programs. And then third, this administration is doing a lot to weaken and undermine the judiciary. So that would be the third bucket.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that is really helpful to just try to organize in our heads all the different ways that we can think about this so that we don't get overwhelmed. And it seems to me that part of what we're starting to see now is that there are some people beginning to stand up and speak out, and constituent advocacy and public pressure and engagement really seems to make a difference. We saw, of course, big mobilizations this past weekend, and a lot of what brought people out were these economic issues that you're talking about. The idea that this administration wants to literally take money, food, healthcare, basic human needs out of the pockets of the poor to give to the rich is really upsetting a lot of people. So it seems like we are starting to see some pushback, maybe some bipartisan pushback even. And this is an opportunity for challenging and continuing to grow that kind of diverse coalition of people across the ideological and political spectrum to really bring people in and start to grow more opposition to what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Great. So let's shift to how do we respond to all of this? How is FCNL responding and how can people get involved?
So I'll start with the first bucket, the budget reconciliation bill. The House and Senate have now each passed this joint budget resolution. And so that really paves the way for these massive cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, the rollbacks to the clean energy incentives. The budget resolution, the reconciliation process is this two-step process, and the budget resolution sort of sets this framework, and the framework calls for these trillions of dollars in cuts. You know, the $880 billion that the Energy and Commerce Committee is instructed to cut. They oversee Medicaid, and there will undoubtedly be big cuts to that program. $230 billion of cuts instructed to the Agriculture Committee, which again, mathematically, there is no way to get that levels of savings without huge cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. These would be the largest cuts in those programs' history. At the same time, extending all of the 2017 tax cuts, which are very regressive, would give the top 0.1% a tax cut of $314,000 a year. And on top of this, hundreds of billions of dollars to the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to fund the administration's mass deportation efforts, along with more money for the Pentagon. So that is sort of the context of what is in this package.
Thank you. And so this is all kind of happening in Congress. There's all this happening with the tariffs and the economic situation globally that's really frightening and could hit all our pocketbooks as well. And you said that the House and Senate passed the budget resolution, but there's more steps in this process, right? Before this becomes law. So what's next and what's the advocacy that can be effective now?
Right. So because they're using this budget reconciliation process, which is this special process, it allows them to move legislation through the Senate with just 51 votes. So they don't need the filibuster. As I said, it is a two-step process. So they pass the budget resolution, this framework that I talked about, that the House just passed today, the Senate passed it last week. That outlines the amount of money that they plan to cut in the general areas. And then they have to actually write the bill that puts the policy changes on paper to get to those spending level increases. And for example, what we are expecting, the two big threats to Medicaid and SNAP, to get to these huge amounts of savings, we expect Congress to require people on Medicaid to report every month that they are working at least 80 hours a month or something like that. And we know that this will cause a lot of people to lose their health care, right? Not necessarily because they're not working. It's just the ability to navigate all that bureaucracy and red tape means a lot of people end up falling off the program. And then SNAP already has some very strict work requirements, but many people, some people are exempt because of their age. Maybe they have a disability, they're a parent of young kids, they're in an area of high unemployment. And so those are some exceptions to those work requirements. Congress would likely remove some of those exceptions. So that's the one thing that we're expecting. One of the things we're expecting them to see in terms of policies that help them get to that level of cuts. The other that is huge is shifting costs to the states so that the federal government would pull back the amount that it is contributing and that states would have to pick up the difference. And as you all know, states are in no way, in no shape to pick up any sort of to pick up this gap. So the goal is to have that actually policy bill written and on the House floor by the end of May and passed in the Senate in June. And so this is really a key moment for advocacy. You know, we really do have a shot at this. We saw you know, it took them a couple attempts to actually get the House to pass that budget resolution, that framework. And they're going to have to kind of be able to get agreement with very, very tight margins in the House and the Senate. Can only lose one vote in the House, and only a couple votes now in the Senate, given where some of the votes lined up originally. So it's very, very tight. And this is our opportunity, as they're trying to make the math add up to get to those cuts, to push back against this. So let's say, especially if you've got a Republican senator or representative, and especially if that's a moderate one, your voice is incredibly, incredibly important. But overall, the more that we can raise the level of the concern and opposition of what these sorts of cuts would do is really important. So just before I move on, I do want to, you know, I talked a lot about SNAP and Medicaid. I know our FCNL network also cares a lot about the migration piece, and this bill does pour a lot of money into deportation, detention, family separation. Do you want to talk a little bit, Bridget? I'll turn it over to you to talk more a little bit about that piece of it.
Sure. Yes. Well, obviously, we are all watching the news and even seeing things happen in our own communities that are shocking and of great concern. And the idea that money taken from these programs, from SNAP and Medicaid, doesn't just hurt the people from those programs, but it's actually going into this mass deportation campaign to pay for that, is really unconscionable, I think. And so we're seeing, of course, the drastic economic impacts, and then we're seeing this horrible enforcement of immigration raids in our communities, disrupting everything from our schools, our houses of worship, hospitals. People are being picked up in their, you know, knocked at the door and picked up from their homes even. It's very shocking. And so, you know, I think one of the things that we have been glad to see is that some steps to push back on this have been effective in some ways. So there was, of course, the rescinding of protections for houses of worship and schools and hospitals at the start of the administration. Quakers and others filed lawsuit and pushed back on that. And there has been some pause in some way. But the reality is, people are so afraid that they are afraid to even show up for church. They're afraid to show up for school. Kids are afraid to go to school. And it's not just undocumented people who are being affected. You know, a lot of you know, Black, brown, indigenous, marginalized communities are being impacted. Of course, the transgender community is very frightened and being impacted. And all of us, I think, are starting to wonder, you know, what comes next, and how is this going to affect us? I will say I was very encouraged to hear the story reported in the last couple of days of a community who had a family in their community, a small town, I think it was up in Maine, that had voted for Trump, many people there, and they had people, 3 kids from the school and their mother, deported, and they fought back and they got bipartisan support for that, and they got that family back. It was an incredibly moving story. So even among all this fear, the use of the Alien Enemies Act, the way that is being used, we are seeing the ability to engage people and make some progress. So that is encouraging. So thinking about how we ensure members of Congress know that we are not going to allow them to just write blank checks for cruelty and for these policies, how do we keep moving forward and really engage people and get them to engage Congress and to really be a co-equal branch of government and push back on this?
So yeah, so I think that's a good kind of transition point, Bridget. We've been talking about the legislation moving in Congress, both the reconciliation bill, there's also the general appropriations process. But you were talking about the executive actions that this administration is taking. So that second bucket is what the administration is doing. And as we're looking at things like DOGE and the ways that the administration is challenging Congress's power of the purse by eliminating these congressionally established agencies and departments like the Department of Education, like USAID, ending funding for a lot of congressionally appropriated programs. Bridget, your area of expertise has really been in foreign assistance, in peace building work. Can you share just what's happened? What are the consequences, and kind of what are we doing about it? And then I can add on and we can go from there.
Yes, well, it has been really shocking to see the dismantling of entire agencies of government and whole categories of funding like foreign aid. And I don't know that people across this country really fully understood the importance of U.S. foreign assistance in keeping people alive, doing things like fighting diseases, climate work, preventing violent conflict. U.S. foreign aid, for all its flaws, and people will know, I critique U.S. foreign aid and the way we do it a lot sometimes, but the fundamental role of the U.S. government and the people of this country saying, yes, we want our government to help people around the world, and we want to put our tax dollars to that, has been completely ripped out from under us. And so there are programs with long-standing bipartisan support. You can think of PEPFAR, HIV/AIDS support that was really rolled out under a Republican administration. Funding cut off. People with HIV, children who've been infected, no medicines. They're not getting them. Health centers in places that are dealing with health crises and also in the midst of violent conflict being shuttered. Sudan, there's a big network of health centers that was built up with U.S. aid funding that has largely been shuttered, and people are no longer able in the midst of a crisis to even get basic health care. So we have been saying really clearly, people are dying from these decisions. And this is really harming people all around the world in devastating ways. And it's not something that just can be turned off and turned back on. So we need to do a lot of work in really pushing forward on getting Republicans in particular, senators and representatives, to stand up to preserve robust funding for foreign assistance. And regardless of the structure, maybe there are changes to the structure that, there's some opportunity to improve things, but we have to restart the aid. And that's going to require bipartisan support. We know, and you, Amelia, have been in many, many conversations with Republican offices. I was lobbying with some of our faith partners and others with Republican offices as well as Democratic offices on restarting foreign aid and getting life-saving assistance moving again. And a lot of what we hear is, even from Republicans, we're really concerned about this. We want to get funding going again. We're trying to get exemptions, but they're afraid to speak out publicly. And so what they need from us is they need the encouragement, they need the political cover, and they need the courage. We need to help them get the courage and really privately is great, but also publicly speak out and push back against these devastating cuts in foreign assistance. And there has been a lot of reluctance among Republicans to publicly criticize this president. We are starting to see a little more willingness to do that on some issues, and some cracks are beginning to emerge, and especially around the tariffs and what's been happening, the ups and downs with that. But we need to know there's a lot of energy from constituents, and we need to keep those doors open, particularly with the Republican offices, and bring these issues forward and ask them to speak out. We know there's going to be ongoing litigation, and the courts, that's really important, but our role is really to make sure they're hearing from their constituents.
Yeah, and I think that just to add on to that, one of the pieces that really connects to this is Congress's power of the purse, which we've mentioned before. Impoundment, the executive branch refusing to spend this money that Congress has appropriated, right? That is unconstitutional. It's also doesn't just violate the Constitution, it also violates the Impoundment and Control Act. That money has to be spent by the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. So we're also looking towards then, there's likely to be a real question about what happens when we get to that date. That's also the date when the current federal government spending bill runs out. So how members of Congress are going to respond to that on both sides of the aisle is a real question. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for advocacy around this and for Congress to stand up about the power of the purse in the coming months.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think one of the things people have been so really taken aback by is that it seems like this administration just doesn't want to follow the law, is just breaking the law. And we've mentioned the role of the courts and ongoing litigation. That's that, third bucket. The administration is directly attacking judges in some cases and undermining the courts. We don't do litigation directly at FCNL. So how does our advocacy make a difference on this set of issues?
Right. So I think one of the things that's important to note is that at this point, no court has really held the administration or any of its attorneys in contempt for violating court orders. So the administration, it might be dragging its feet or raising additional legal arguments on why they don't think they need to comply, but the courts have yet to rule that the administration isn't complying with court orders. And that's an important point to note. At some point, the administration is doing a lot to undermine the court's legitimacy. And at some point, and so right now, getting out there either through letters to the editor, op-eds in the local media, pressing about the important role that courts play as a check on the other branches of government, clearly communicating the tactics that this administration is using, what's at stake, why defying and eroding courts, why that matters. It's really important to signal that there's this big tent coalition ready to mobilize on this issue, especially if we see courts finding that the administration isn't complying with their orders.
That's really helpful. And I think part of what I'm understanding through all of this about our work and the work that people can do with us is that the institutions of democracy that we're seeing eroded, they need us as advocates to really help hold them up. And we can do that with Congress and through public things like letters to the editor, et cetera. And so it helps give you something concrete that we can do to make a difference. And I think that's what we want people to feel. There's something practical and concrete that we can all do even amidst this ongoing shock and awe. So I would love to get really concrete now and pull in LaVida. And LaVida is amazing at working with our grassroots network to give people specific actions that we can take that can have an impact. So LaVida, welcome and tell us what we should be doing.
Awesome. Well, before I get into that, I really want to focus on our young adults. This last March, we had our incredible Spring Lobby Day weekend, where over 300 young adults from around the country came into DC and lobbied to preserve Medicaid and SNAP. I would love to show just a little video just to give folks a glimpse of the incredible work that our young adults did. It was amazing. So if we can just go ahead and show that video right quick, that would be awesome. That was great. Not only did we have young adults from around the country, but they were so diverse. You had young adults from the entire political persuasion, from all parts of the country. It was just amazing to see them come together and learn about these super important issues and go on the Hill and just use their voices and share their stories. Super, super important. Now, I want to share with you all what are some concrete things you can do right now to really get out there and stand up and fight for peace and justice. If we can show that PowerPoint, get that PowerPoint going. First and foremost, Bridget talked about this earlier. We're upon April recess. April recess is happening from April 14th through the 25th. April recess is happening. And what we're asking our entire network to do is to do drop-by congressional visits to your local offices. And you can choose the issue. You can either lobby on Medicaid, SNAP, climate, migration, foreign aid. All of these issues have been touched on to some extent in this conversation, and we certainly have been talking about it throughout all the work of FCNL. You can do drop-by issues and in this web link. And let me just say up front, no worries. All of this will be sent to you and the follow-up emails with all of the links. So do not worry about missing anything. But with this link, you will have information that will tell you how to locate your representative and your senator's offices. You will get leave behinds for all these issues. You'll also get a script that'll tell you how to interact with staff. And also super, super important, how to let us know how your lobby visit went, how your drop-by experience went, because we want to know what happened. And in addition to that, the next thing that we're talking about is how to do letters to the editor and op-ed, which is what Bridget and Amelia have talked about as well, which is a super, super important tool to let folks know, and particularly a member of Congress know, and bring attention to the issues that you care about. This wonderful tool, which is available on our website. And again, the link will be sent to you in the follow-up email. I'll talk to you about how to write letters to the editor. It'll give you past letters that have been written, and also any questions that you may have about that, and just templates. So this is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tool, and also how to do op-eds as well. Our next thing that you can do is, how to meet your, how to schedule a lobby visit. How to schedule a lobby visit with your member of Congress, which is huge. It's our bread and butter, is what we do as FCNL. We build those relationships. We share our stories. We get in front of our members of Congress. It talks to you about how to choose a topic. It gives you all of our issues and the leave behinds, the background information that you need to know about all of the issues, deciding who's going, how to schedule your meeting. It walks you through the roadmap. It gives you all of the good information that you need. You'll get a link to this website address as well. And last but not least, how to call or email your member of Congress, which is super, super important. This is a wonderful, wonderful tool that's on our website that gives you information about the issue. This one's specifically talking about U.S. foreign assistance, and what Amelia and Bridget was just recently talking about as far as the cuts that have been happening. It gives you an overview, but it gives you a pre-populated letter. But there, as you can see on the screen, there's a part that talks about, I care about this because, where you can personalize that letter, which is super, super, super important for you to talk about. Why do you care? And that makes it 10 times more important to that member of Congress, because getting form letters, not so good. But when you personalize that letter, that makes it way more important. And it populates the information. Your member of Congress information will shoot it out to them, and it'll populate your information on the bottom. If I was able to take the entire screenshot, you'll see LaVida Davis and Oak Park, Illinois. And these are my members of Congress: Tammy Duckworth, Dick Durbin, and Congressman Danny Davis. So these are just some of the few things that you can do right now to get out there and make things happen.
Thank you so much, LaVida. So it sounds like, just to recap, we've got calling or emailing your members of Congress. You'll have a link for that. Scheduling your lobby visit, you'll have a link for that. Doing a letter to the editor, link for that, and dropping by your congressional office, which is kind of like the gold standard during April recess. To be able to do that, you have that opportunity. You might even see your member, which would be great. So wonderful. So we'll send all that information out. We're going to turn to questions. We have so many questions coming in, just so folks know. We have around 350 people on the call. And so lots of questions. We're trying to organize them. But before we do that, I just want to pause for a minute and ask you both, how do we keep hope? How do we act with hope at this time? That is something people ask us, that I struggle with, how to, really keep hope alive, let's say, in the midst of all of this. So I don't know, LaVida, would you want to go first?
Sure. I think that how I keep hope alive, let me just say that, is really standing on the shoulders of folks that have gone on before us. We have been here before. And there are folk that have gone on before us, particularly in the peace and justice movement, that have fought hard and long against huge odds, that we stand on the shoulders of, and that we must remember, and that we must take solace in, that things for sure are difficult. Things are pretty polarized right now, but this is not the first time. And we have a role to play. Um, as part of our values and who we are, what we're called to do. We must get out there and we must do it. It's not going to be easy. Some days are going to be difficult for sure, but we have community, we have each other, and we just got to get out there and do what we need to do.
Thank you, LaVida. It's a good reminder that our democracy has always been a struggle for some people more than others, and that we have a long history of having to struggle. So thank you for that. Amelia, what about you?
Yeah, well, I love LaVida's question because my answer absolutely built on that. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is from Hebrews. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders, the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Consider him who endured such opposition that you will not grow weary or lose heart. And like LaVida said, we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. That cloud of witnesses extends through time. I imagine, those heroes, those justice heroes from our past, like cheering us on in this moment. We do this together in community, and it is the great cloud of witnesses of those individuals who are standing with us today, that this is how we get through it. It is both in community that we do that, but it is also in community that we are able to kind of push back against what we are seeing today, right? The power is in the form of money and in form of people, and we have people power, and our ability to kind of grow our community is so important right now. But that is what gives me strength and hope, and seeing all the actions and the growth in of just activism and advocacy just over the past couple months. It is astounding. Like, You come here to Washington, the lines to get into the buildings are, I have never seen, like, we have to leave ages and ages before the meeting because it's like I might have to stand in line for 30 minutes just to be able to. I have never seen that before. The phones are ringing off the hook. What we saw on Saturday across the country in places and people who have never, kind of showed up in this way before. So that gives me a lot of encouragement and hope. And for us to kind of nurture and celebrate and help bring more people into this work, I think is really important.
I think that's right. And I'm right with both of you that it is how we do this work in community that will get us through and that will build the resilience and be able to change the course that we're on. I have been amazed by the lines as well in Washington, but I have been so moved by the solidarity that I have felt and been given in recently when I've been traveling to different places, including internationally, people around the world are with us. They're sending me messages. The folks in Poland, when I was there, were all wanting to say, what can we do to help? How do we support you? The folks in a conference in Little Binghamton, New York, that I was at, from around the world, people were there, all sort of saying we have to build solidarity together. This is not just the US, this is affecting the whole world, and we can learn from those around the world who've also gone through struggles with authoritarian regimes, and they want to support us as well. So that solidarity, I think that is going to be really the core of how we need to work together. So, so thank you. Let's turn to some questions. There are a lot. And I want to start with a question, and we're trying to group some of these questions together, but there are a number of questions we've received about, we talked about Republicans and the importance of trying to get them to speak up and stand out. What if folks have Democrat members of Congress who may be with us, but seem to not have a lot of power, right now to move things? What should people be doing with Democrat members of Congress right now?
Well, I think it depends on the issue, but I would say like there is still those who are kind of trying to do it, like thanking them for the work that they are doing. I think it's always important to thank when members of Congress do things we want them to do and say things we want them to say. It is always important to thank them. And sometimes we go straight to the next thing that we want them to do. So I think thanking them and showing them that there is support for what they are doing. But I will say in the Medicaid SNAP and reconciliation piece, we are seeing a lot of people talk about Medicaid. We are seeing a lot less when it comes to the supplemental nutrition assistance program. And so, gosh, if we could get the same level of outcry around cutting SNAP benefits as we do for Medicaid, that would be so like really encouraging folks to not let that get left behind, that is important. The other place that, is a little bit more quiet is on the migration part. We, again, in this reconciliation bill, we hear a lot about the cuts of Medicaid, not a lot about what this is going to do in terms of pouring more money into detention, deportation, and family separation, border militarization. So that is another area where Democrats could be more, and on the increases into the Pentagon budget. So like helping them and show that there is the political will and to talk about migration and opposing putting more money into that, I think is another area to be able to do that. And that is both in all of the advocacy actions, both in communicating with them, but also the local media piece is really important too, to show there is public support for those things as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I am encouraged that there are some bipartisan efforts starting, to push back on tariffs and other things. And of course, we're nonpartisan. It's not to us an issue of Republican or Democrat, but we have to kind of help them exercise those bipartisan muscles again, too, I think, and figure out how do we move beyond this. I don't know, LaVida, do you have any thoughts on, engaging folks, the things that people can do if their members already agree with them?
I agree with Amelia. I think it's important to thank folk when they do the right thing. I think too often we just take that for granted and move on. And I also think that in those important areas where people are silent and where we could use more support, that we need to refocus folks' attention to do the right thing. But then also, I think another thing is when we do have their support, to engage them on how they can amplify their support. How can they talk to other members, other colleagues to solicit their support? Is another thing to think about. Other members in their caucus is also important to do.
Great, thank you. Lots of avenues, and I will underline the thank you. I did drop off a handwritten thank you letter to Cory Booker's office after his 25-hour historic speech on the floor. So that's so important to keep thanking them. We've got a number of questions about sort of the practicalities of advocacy and whether advocacy makes a difference right now. You know, or is it more important to be in the streets, you know, protesting? Should we be writing letters or calls? What makes a difference right now? I wonder, Amelia, if you could speak to those kinds of questions.
I love this question because I'm hearing it all the time on the other side. Like, I'm in congressional visits all the time. And the number one thing that when it's like, what else can we be doing? What can we, and from Republican to Democratic offices across the spectrum, they are like, keep up this advocacy. Like, that is the most important thing. I had one staffer say to me, the most important thing you can do right now is schedule a meeting with get folks around the country to schedule meetings with their members of Congress and talk to the congressional staff about these issues. So that is incredibly, incredibly important. I am hearing that and that it is helping. Like, even if you don't necessarily see it, that pressure, they are seeing it more from the inside. They're going to see those cracks start to form more than we, first. And when we start to, so I think all of that is helping. And so the gold standard is the lobby visit, right? If you can schedule a lobby visit with the member of Congress or their staff, that's the gold standard. Or then if you can drop by the office, that's really good in District 2. The other things are, personalized letters and phone calls, whether it's an email or a phone call, those are, both are fine, but it being personalized, the more you personalize it, the more that's going to carry weight. And like down at the, like what offices pay the least attention to are like petitions, right? So it is one of those things where the more energy you put into it, the more the office is going to see that and take note. And, I agree. It's not just, you can't just do the advocacy one time and then you're done for, but we got to keep up the pressure. So it's like, okay, now can we bring other people in, get other folks to be doing those things. The other pieces like letters to the editor and op-eds, those are incredibly important as well. Members of Congress are paying a lot of attention to what is being said in the district about them and about the issues. So that's another area that can be really, really powerful.
Great. Did you want to add anything, LaVida?
Yeah, and also I think it's a public education campaign as well. Not only are you engaging your member of Congress, but you're letting other folks in your community know that you care about this issue and that they should be thinking about it too. And to the point around, should you be in the streets or is it about engaging a member of Congress? I think there's a role to be played for both. It's imperative that both happen. There's absolutely a role to be played around engaging in legislative advocacy. We have got to be able to intentionally maintain and continue to build relationships with members of Congress. If we have any hopes of righting this ship as pressure is being brought to bear. So this advocacy is key.
Absolutely. Yes, I was talking to an expert on nonviolent social movements globally, and I actually asked him because he was talking about how important, obviously, public pressure is and mobilizing people in that way. And I said, what about advocacy right now and FCNL's role? And he said, Absolutely. You have to have both an outside and an inside game, and you have to connect them. And I think actually FCNL is really good at, we know a lot of our folks may be doing things, to protest in the streets. And I was in the little Binghamton protest, but we link that to, okay, we've got to get to these decision makers in the right moments, and we have to be there keeping those doors open, having those relationships, and pushing them on the policy steps. So yes, we need both and our role is really important. I want to take a couple more questions. We are getting a little short on time, so I'll take a couple more, and I want to assure people that we will try to also respond to questions later on. We can reach out. You can reach back out to us. If we don't get to your question, we will not get to them all. We always want to support your lobbying. So, but a couple more. One is a technical question about what's happening with funding. So, Amelia, I'm going to turn to you for this. And the question says that the money that was appropriated, right? Congress's role is to appropriate the money to agencies or states or foreign aid funding, all that money that's just been stopped. What happens to it? Can it be used for other things, or does it just sit there?
Well, that's a good question. I don't, so the administration has a fair amount of money to leeway to move some stuff around, but I don't know all the, that is, I think there are a lot of caveats to that. So there is some ability for them to do that, but not necessarily. And that's why I like the appropriations bills and them being able to name this amount of money for these programs helps in the litigation efforts that we're seeing and expect to see. So that was part of the fight around the continuing resolution. If you remember back when it was like whether the government would shut down, and Schumer made the so that was part of that. We, at the end of the day, if they don't, if they don't spend the money, I think it is there. I don't know where it goes, but that's then empowerment. If Congress has said you need to spend this money, and by the end of the fiscal year, they have not spent that money, then that is impoundment. And so that is where then it is kind of actively unconstitutional, and we'll probably see some litigation efforts and things around that. So
Great.
that's all I can say at that point. Yeah, and there's a lot of parts of this that I'm not an expert in the Impoundment and Control Act and some of those other things that I will leave to experts to be able to kind of inform us, that then we can hopefully translate to you.
Yeah, and it's a good question to ask your member of Congress, right? Like, hey, Congress, you appropriated this money. Do you know what's going to happen to it? They should be asking that too. So one more question. It's a big one. We can't answer it all, but we have worked a lot on Gaza and the situation in the Middle East. And are we still working on that? How does it relate to all of this? Obviously, people who are working on these issues are, in some cases being targeted. So what's our work on that look like right now?
And I was like, Hassan literally just poked his head in the, but I think he walked away. So otherwise I would have pulled him in here. But yeah, this is still the work of the advocacy team. So we're still trying to work on kind of talking about the importance of funding for UNRWA. There was just a vote on the joint resolutions of disapproval that Senator Sanders had introduced and forced a vote on around some of the offensive weapons that went to Israel. So that work continues to be ongoing, and we continue to press around the need for both the humanitarian assistance, the importance of UNRWA, and then the importance of blocking further offensive weapons going to Israel. So that work is still, and it it might not, there's so much in the headlines these days that can sometimes feel like it's getting lost, but it's important for us to continue that effort and continue that work. And it's, I can assure you, Hassan and Odelia are not slowing down on this, and our advocacy teams are continuing to do amazing work on this. So it remains to be a priority for us. Our advocacy corps are still working on this. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you both. So we want to do a quick recap. We know this was a lot of information about how you can take action. So we could put up that last slide, maybe, Justin. And just to recap, We are so, so grateful for all of you for joining us and being part of this work. And so remember, there are so many ways you can take action for democracy. This picture is in my neighborhood. It is a neighbor. I actually decided I'm going to knock on this person's door and thank them for having this sign in their yard, because I walk by it every day with my dog on my walk, and it gives me encouragement. John Lewis, Representative John Lewis, democracy is not a state. It is an act. We have to practice it to keep it alive. So please take action with us. Do those advocacy actions. We'll send you all that information and those links. You have the recess coming up. It's a wonderful opportunity. Advocate with us. Amplify and educate. Those LTEs, letters to the editor, in the media are really important. And as LaVida said, a way to educate your whole community. Help us grow our network. Please invite others to be part of FCNL's work. We know we need more and more people across the country and across different perspectives and beliefs. We're doing lots of interfaith work. Please bring people into our network. And please do consider supporting FCNL's work financially if you don't already. I know many of the people on this call already do. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We cannot do this work without you. And we need to sustain our democracy. So consider being a sustaining donor, a monthly donor, and we'll send you that link as well. We are so, so grateful for all that you do. You give us hope. You keep us working here in Washington. And we are all together building solidarity and community that we need. So thank you so much. I just want to close us with a bit of a sort of calming moment and a poem that I have been writing and using to center myself. And I mentioned my visit to Auschwitz at the beginning of the call. And during the Nazi regime, there was a Lutheran pastor named Martin Niemöller, who was a supporter of the regime and then switched and regretted. And he wrote a poem of sort of lamentation and confession. First, it's called First They Came, and you may know it. First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist, et cetera, et cetera. And then they came for me and nobody was left. So I have been redoing that poem for this moment for us now. And I want to share it with you as our closing reflection. First, they came for the immigrants, and we spoke out because immigrants are our neighbors. Then they came for transgender people, and we spoke out because transgender people are our neighbors. Then they came for the poor and marginalized, and we spoke out because the poor and marginalized are our neighbors. Then they came for civil servants, and we spoke out because civil servants are our neighbors. Then they came for the students, and we spoke out because students are our neighbors. Then they came for us. But we were not afraid, and we spoke out together because we are called to love our neighbors, no exceptions. Thank you, friends. Have a wonderful evening. Keep on keeping on. We'll be with you too. Thank you so much for all that you do.